stork doing, actually? What has it got? Fish! It's got a fish! That's incredible! An enormous fish! There's some scarlet ibises as well, by the way, but that's not... What on earth have you found? Where? That poor fish is absolutely enormous. Is that a fish? That must have washed all the way down from one of the river systems in the rain. Surely. That is really cool. Obviously washed down in the flood, because we must have got, if I had to guess, 70 mils last night. Possibly even more. I mean, it really, really flooded this particular part of the Mara. It must have washed down all the way and found itself stranded here, if indeed that is what it is. Looks like a fish to me. You can see the marabou's actually tearing pieces off it and then swallowing them. There's a possibility it's a piece of carcass or something like that, but it looks shiny. I suppose it would be if it was in the water and the mud. Could also be a dead monitor lizard. I'm not 100% sure what it's got, but I think it's a fish. No, it's definitely a fish. That's definitely a fish. That's incredible. I wonder which particular river system it came from. Poor thing, it's huge. Doesn't look like a catfish either, although it's hard to tell. Huh. That is interesting. We are far away from any of the big rivers. I mean, the Mara's over there, but it hasn't come from the Mara River. This is washed down. Which one would it have come from? Because the luggers do have water for a large part of the year, but they also dry up regularly. Now, for a catfish, that wouldn't be a problem. They can go deep beneath the mud, and they can coat themselves in a mucousy sheath, and they can actually survive in that manner, even when their water holes dry out. I'm fascinated. I would love to know where this fish came from, unless it took it from somewhere. Futa, apparently you think it does look like a catfish. It could easily be. It's difficult to tell at this distance, and I'm also looking through quite a small monitor, so I could easily have missed it. And of course, you get different species of catfish, but I just didn't see the protrusions on the end of the face. But it could easily be a catfish. I could so easily have got that wrong. Pardon?
I think it's a catfish.
Okay, Jahawi's saying he thinks it's a catfish as well. That's so cool. I mean, not for the poor catfish, obviously. Just to make that clear. It's not so cool for the catfish. But that is really cool for us. Huh. Fascinating. Sassy B, that was my next train of thought, which is absolutely what you're thinking along the same lines. You're thinking maybe it could have been dropped there by a bird. If it was caught up by a fish eagle and perhaps dropped along the way, maybe a fish eagle being bombarded by another bird, that is entirely possible. The only reason I think it's been washed here is this whole thing, as I said, was underwater this morning. It was basically a lake, which does make me think perhaps it got washed in. It seems a bit coincidental, but you're right, it could easily have been dropped there by another bird. Perhaps if it got too heavy, if the fish eagle took off with more than it could manage. It's possible, it's entirely possible. I have found catfish heads in the strangest of places. Most of the time, though, when a fish eagle catches a fish, it will not go too far with it. But maybe if it was disturbed for some reason. Interesting to watch the marabou in the way that it's eating as well. Obviously, it can't fit that entire fish down its throat and swallow it whole. So this whole process is a tricky one. And involves, because it can't really slice, involves grabbing it and then tearing chunks off by shaking the fish around. Relaxing Emma says, maybe it's just a ghost fish. Or if so, that poor Marabou Stork is going to be highly, highly disappointed. And possibly very confused. Interesting. I'd love to know if that marabou caught it itself or if it just happened to have washed up there. They can catch fish. I have seen them catch fish before. They are largely scavenging birds, but I have seen them hunt before, and I have seen them catch things like fish and snakes and frogs. You can see it's spreading its wings, I think to provide itself with a little bit of extra balance as well. It's a tricky spot, and I think it must be incredibly muddy there. Probably sinking slightly. And a Marabou Stork is a big bird. It's almost finished now. Table manners are appalling. Don't sink, don't sink, don't sink, don't sink. Cool. Now, Palin thinks that Marabou Storks are so ugly and yet so beautiful at the same time. In this, and for me to say this is an unusual thing, but in this I would say that Marabou Storks are ugly. Full stop. I'm not sure I would say that I suppose in flight there's a certain elegance. I would say that they're awe-inspiring, they're massive, they are graceful in their own way, except when they're eating dead fish. But I don't know that I would ever call a Marabou Stork beautiful. They are pungent, but I'm more than happy to accept your opinion, because a lot of people think warthogs are very ugly, and I think warthogs are quite pretty. The same goes for ground hornbill. I think ground hornbill are quite pretty birds, but they apparently are quite ugly, according to quite a few people. That was fascinating. Shall we go on and see if the lion cubs are out and playing? It's still a little bit early, it's still a little bit hot.